In line with the German political scientist Elisabeth Neumann, the spiral of silence theory is a principle that describes political science and mass communication. It explains that because of the different viewpoints of the members, a social group or community could dissociate them. This theory was originated during the 1965 German political race in link with voting data analysis. Neumann and her assistants carried out a set of questionnaires to monitor the voters' political views. Public sentiment was developed as a means of social action that relates to anyone. This principle tries to explain the friction of social viewpoints and social judgments about the contentious issues.
The general purpose of the theory is opinions or views of majority being accepted while the contradictory opinions or views being remain in silence. When the majority views being approached, the minority people mostly remain in silence to prevent themselves from making mistakes. There are few assumptions of the theory based on the minority people. The first assumption of the theory is every individual has a quasi-static organ which is normally declared as sixth sense that makes them know prevailing majority public. The second assumption of the theory is individuals have fear of isolation from a group of people. The third assumption of the theory is people have fear of reprisal or vengeance. This can cause more extreme isolation or exclusion. The main aspect of the theory is the fear of being isolated and excluded from the group. Minority people would not speak up their opinion or view that easily compared to the majority people who makes a quick move. This is because they fear of being isolated and excluded from the group because of their views. The process of the theory works as the spiral reflects as the willingness of speaking between the majority and the minority people. The top shows the majority while the end shows the minority.
Since Movement Control Order began to be conducted on March 22, 2020, there are various new norms that exist to make our life today adhere to standard operating social guidelines. One of the new norms is online learning. The first point from this part is students do not want to speak during online class is majority compared to minority students who take part to talk in online class. This is because they do not want to feel isolated from the majority group that is just silent. This aforementioned theory also relates to students that are being silent because of the environment in the online class. Lastly, students also feel embarrassed to ask in class because they think they are not in the class.
This theory aims to explain the development of public sentiment and social decision-making on topics that are contentious or morally failed. It also happened in the remote learning and online communication where people are restraining themselves from giving opinions because they are afraid their opinions will not be accepted. Then, the theory also received criticism that fear of isolation is the only reason to explain the willingness of a person to speak out. And another criticism is that there is an argue about whether the referent group is impacting a person's willingness to express their viewpoints. The strength of the spiral of silence is it can explain the reason of people who feel they are minority were not willing to share their opinion to the majority. Secondly, this theory works well during campaign. It accounts for public opinion during campaign as the origin of this theory itself arose with the connection of election research. Next, the weaknesses of this theory is it may not considering the explanation of the silence. The individual who are silencing may have other reason to the silences. Another weakness is it has an excessively negative impression of average people's media influence.
In conclusion, we could conclude that the climbing of viewpoints and the spiral of silence are closely related, especially in the remote learning. This situation is described as a level of awareness wherein the people are conscious that their behaviors are noticed by everyone, requiring not merely their own behaviors but also the responses of the others in their surroundings to be regularly monitored.